if someone is looking to gain muscle mass, usually a very simple approach is to multiply their body weight times 15. So for example, if you're working with an athlete who weighed 200 pounds, you would multiply 200 pounds times 15, which would put them right around 3,500 calories a day. Again, that is a very simplified approach. Now, maybe they aren't looking to gain muscle mass, but they simply want to maintain their weight. Well, then we could simply multiply their body weight times 12. Again, this is really simplifying it, and there are much more specific ways that you can get in terms of determining calorie needs. But simple approach, this usually is a decent rule of thumb, and then we can build from there and take it from there. Again, maybe in conjunction with a dietitian or a sports dietitian, you can start to look at more specific ways to give very specific calorie needs. But multiplying body weight times 12, again, like I said, to maintain body weight often works well. So going back to that example, someone weighs 200 pounds, you multiply their body weight times 12, so that would give them about 2,400 calories a day on average. And then lastly, if someone is looking to lose fat, you can multiply their body weight times 10. Again, using the example of the 200-pound athlete, multiply that times 10, and that person would get approximately 200 calories a day. But this is a decent baseline to give an idea of where people should be, athletes should be, with their calorie intake. Now, when we look at overall calories and components of calorie expenditure, so we have calorie intake, and that is the foods we eat and the beverages we consume, the beverages with calories, that is. Now, there's a lot of factors that play a role in calorie expenditure, how many calories you expend each day. And you can see this graph here, this chart. The biggest component of that is something called resting metabolic rate. And that is that's the largest component of energy expenditure and accounts for about 60 to 75% of your overall energy expenditure. Now, depending on lean body mass and overall body weight, age and gender, those factors all play a role in your resting metabolic rate and how many calories you expend each day just being you, just staying alive. Then we have a small piece called the thermic effect of feeding. Now, that varies slightly, but that's only about 10 to 15% of your total energy expenditure. And what do I mean by that, thermic effect of feeding? Well, basically when we eat food, it needs to be digested and assimilated and so on for energy. Well, it requires energy to do that. And certain foods, like protein, for example, require more energy than other foods like fat. So if you had a very, very high protein diet, you would have a higher thermic effect of food than if you ate primarily a big component of your diet as fat. It's not to say that that's the way what I'm recommending, but I'm just giving you an extreme example. So on average, it's about, like I said, 10 to 15% of your total energy expenditure. But even regardless of your overall diet, it's not going to vary tremendously. And then last but not least, you see the red piece of this kind of chart I have here. And you can see it's kind of a jagged line in this chart. Well, it's because physical activity is variable. And it's the most variable component of energy expenditure, contributing up to 30% of your total calories per day that you're expending, because it depends on your training, your type of training. For example, an Ironman triathlete is going to be at a much higher level of energy expenditure than a second baseman, for example, on the baseball field, who does a lot more standing around than continuous physical activity. So depending on the athlete, depending on the activity, that last piece can be variable. So this just gives you an idea. It's a nice, very simplified chart of calorie expenditure as a whole.